How did that feel though? Because
Oh, it's painful. It sucks.
it felt like a death.
Oh, it is. It absolutely does. I mean, it still feels like a death. It sucks. It's not easy.
Is there times where something happened, you want to pick up the phone and call your best friend, you be like,
No.
that don't, you pass that stage?
Yeah, no. There's none of that. But there is, it's grief, and there's stages that come in grief. There probably was a time where I wanted to do that. I'm not at that place right now.
Well, listen, hey guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. Baby, listen, how does friends who were best friends for almost 20 years get to a point where they are almost frenemies and they don't seem to seem to see eye to eye? They're now on separate podcasts differently. Megan's saying that she doesn't feel like picking up the phone to her best friend, previous ex-best friend. We got B Simone with a quote unquote potentially shady video as well on her page, which if you haven't watched, go watch my part 1. I will play the clip here a little bit later on as well. How do we get to this point? And obviously my title is a little bit triggering. I've said obviously friendship is done. Megan is a little bit manipulative. Well, this was actually her own words. She actually told us she's manipulative. And I want to say this as well. When we have silent expectations and people don't meet them, they tend to ruin a lot of relationships, especially romantic ones. But friendships can also suffer when people have been silently suffering in their expectations of one another. And not only are the silent expectations causing this friendship to be at the place of being done, there's another part, which is that both of them are manipulative. And let me break it down to you really, really quickly, right? When you are dealing with insecure attachments, meaning when we talk about avoidant, anxious avoidant, and then we talk about obviously dysfunctional, or we call it fearful avoidant, right? Attachment styles. They tend to have within their insecurity manipulation, because each party is looking for something to secure them with. This is why we're looking to be secure in our attachment. When you're insecure, you tend to play with manipulation in your particular arena. The anxious avoidant person uses manipulation by control, possession, jealousy, trying to be overly nice, trying to do things, thinking ahead about you, when really actually a lot of it is not just about being nice or being good. A lot of it's also because you want to be loved and validated, and you do it as a process of being validated rather than just being, right? So there's another aspect of that where you say it's for us, but really it's for you. Then the avoidant also is manipulative too, because they want the relationship the way they want the relationship. I don't want you committing too much emotion. I don't want you getting too close. When you start doing that, I'm going to start pulling away. But I want to pull away because I want to see how much you're going to pull me back in. I need to know that you love me and care about me too. And both of them have issues with trust when it comes to a relationship. And this is why the friendships like this tend to kind of suffer along the way. And what the reality of the situation, neither Megan nor B Simone are the hero or the villain here. It's a simple fact of when we don't learn to grow and we don't learn to tolerate, because a lot of our friendships, let's be honest, all of us have learned to tolerate certain behaviors of the other party. The issue is that they got into business. And see, when you play with money and friendships, woo, that's why B Simone said she wanted to focus on the business. Your friendship will suffer because most of us, and I say a lot of us, not most of us, a lot of us are coming from an insecure attachment style. If you look at your friendships and the person you're very close to, those of you who are not secure, if you're an avoidant or anxious, you probably find out the other person's also an avoidant too. An avoidant and an anxious person. And that's how you two came together, right? Because opposites seem to attract in this particular instance. I don't know why, but they seem to create this toxic cycle. And the reality is, more than likely, most of us have learned how to what? Tolerate that party. So an anxious person would need to have 2 or 3 friends, because the avoidant person is not reliable because they're self-reliant and tend to roll solo. The avoidant person will tend to have many friends too, but because they have many friends, but they're not close to many of those friends because they come and go as they please. Now, when you are the avoidant and the anxious in a relationship, a friendship like that, if you add business, which requires you to focus away from the emotional aspect, but it requires you also to be understanding when emotions is needed, because in order to sell a product, you need to be emotional. Do you understand what I'm saying? You need to sell something, you need to know what your audience are moved by. We don't buy products without emotions. Our emotions move us to go and buy products, right? Our needs and our wants, they lead us into what? Going to buy something. And we tap into that through emotions. So it's not that the avoidant doesn't know what emotions are. It's just that the avoidant doesn't want to deal with emotions within a scope of a relationship because it's overwhelming. The language, the energy, the time, it becomes overbearing for the avoidant person because their background has been one of emotional neglect. So they don't relate on that level. But for the anxious person, the emotions are important because they are part of connecting to somebody. Now, someone might say, well, the anxious person's right. They're not right. Because as they do that, what that happens is their insecurity makes them want to control scenarios. So they expect something from you the way they're doing for you. Right? So they might tell you, listen, I'm doing all of this for you, and then expect you to do the same thing. Well, you don't give out of expectation. Now, we should be given, but it's not out of expectation. An anxious person gives in order to have status within the relationship. They give so much in order to be loved and cared and validated. Why? Because their own upbringing was inconsistent emotional care, and therefore, in that place, what they need to do is that they need to prove that they're valuable. And what ends up happening is an avoidant meets an anxious person and they end up manipulating one another, right? Now, of course, as time goes on, you're supposed to grow and mature and maybe come out of those attachment styles. But the reality is many of us don't come out of the attachment style because we don't even realize we're operating in an attachment style. We don't even realize our behaviors are off key. So look, I'll give you a quick little breakdown. We're going to go deeper into this video. I'm going to play more of this clip. I'm going to show you some more stuff, but I wanted to explain that to you as well. Listen. If you're new to the channel, make sure you like, you share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notifications of the uploads. We've done a couple of videos of this already, so go and watch those ones. But this is some new stuff I want to break down for you guys as well.
Deeper.
Listen, let's get deep, man. Let's get deep. All right, cool. I'm going to roll this back slightly, okay? I'm going to take you back to here. And someone might be saying, no, Megan's not manipulative. She's not like that because everyone... And listen, don't get twisted. There's a video that's going around at the moment. In fact, I'll play it actually right now because I think it is good to bring it into discourse to understand why I'm talking about this. Let's play this little clip here. Give me a second.
I have long-term relationships. Any relationship I'm no longer in, a man, a business, a friend, I have walked away from. Ain't no niggas walking away from me. Smash your pass. I'm already on a red.
Yeah, not a good look, is it, really? To be honest, not really a good look when you hear that. There's a little bit of boasting coming from her. I did that in part 1, so I won't go too deep in it. So I just wanted to establish where we are in this relationship, where we are in this particular issue, right? And I wanted to just play more of this clip, and I'm going to show you something, and hopefully it'll make a bit more sense as well for you guys.
Manipulative. What does that look like in a relationship?
I think I'm really good with my words. All the things like you learn.
I want people to hear this because see, a lot of men, y'all don't think women can be accountable. Now look at this. I know you heard that on social media, like women can never be accountable.
Oh, mouthy, disrespectful, all of the things.
You said manipulative. What does that look like in a relationship?
I think I'm really good with my words. So like the thing that you're gifted in, I feel like is the very thing the enemy tries to attack you in. And so the very thing that God wants to use you for his glory and for his kingdom is the very thing that the enemy wants to use you for his agenda and plan. And so when my heart is far from the Lord, I can be manipulative in conflict and trying to be defensive and trying to get you to come to what I want you to come to. You know what I mean? So
how did you come to this? Well, probably therapy, huh?
Therapy is helpful, but it's like, you know yourself. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like truth.
Now, I spoke about this in a couple of other videos, and I know a lot of people were kind of a little bit like, wow, how does that make sense? How can they were looking at Megan as like the saint almost. And I was trying to get people to understand that there's no saints in this. Like, Simone is not innocent and neither is Megan. Then neither of them are innocent. The friendship is over. And the friendship is over because both people contributed towards the vehicle crashing. And in these scenarios, I look from a lot of my comments, and a lot of people were saying, I was friends with a dismissive person, and yeah, they were so selfish. And I'm looking at them going, you don't realize you were probably selfish, right? Because, and I'm going to play some more of the clip to make you understand here, right? In this relationship, there's a lot that's happening. When an anxious person's in a relationship with an avoidant, right? The avoidant becomes manipulative because they pull away, but the anxious person wants to win that person over, not for the greater good, but for their own validation, right? Their own validation. So they are both manipulative. You're winning the person over and you're not listening. If I say to you, leave me alone, and you don't leave me alone, because it's for the greater good. I know that you want us to be friends. I'm not saying that's what happened here, right? when you say that, you're not actually caring about me. You only care about you. You care about you not having a friend at the moment. You care about you not actually having somebody there for you. So it becomes about you, not about the actual us, but you cover it with the, it's for us. I'm doing it for us. You're not. You're doing it for you. And a lot of people have become save them, and you wanting to save people is about your own selfishness and about your own validation. So neither of these parties are actually good. B. Simone with her avoidancy and inability to be able to contain some level of emotional, to contain too much emotional dialogue or situations that they've experienced. It's never gonna lead to a productive relationship long term. The fact it's gone for 20 years, I know they had a break in between that time, and the fact it's gone for 20 years is testament. But it also shows as well that maybe like coming to a place of understanding. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm an avoidant myself. I've been best friends with my best friend for like almost 10 years. And I have to be honest with you, sometimes I'm not the greatest, because I'm not always a person that, you know what, when there's a lot of emotional things going on in a relationship, I'm like, hey. If you need solutions or you need me to be a counselor, you need me to sort an issue out, there we can go. Then I'm there. You understand? I'm there. I'm solution oriented. I didn't realize how I was. I'm very solution oriented. I'm like, all right, I know how to fix this. Let's do it. But when you want me just to listen and sit there, we're not getting anywhere. There are no solutions coming. You know, every day is an emotion. My friend, I'm gonna be away. Now that leads me to a place where I can't also support the person as I need to. But it also, and so what it leaves a gap is that both parties actually become unsatisfied because both are coming from an insecure perspective. Okay, and when both people are coming from an insecure perspective, they are insatiable. Okay, so I want to play something for you because I want to get deeper with this issue as well because there's a lot to go through. Okay, so in this situation, I really believe there's a lot more going on with the B. Simone and Megan situation that wasn't necessarily they were trying to allude to but couldn't elicit. And I'm going to make a statement here. It is very tough for either party because there was something going on, I believe, with Megan that Megan would have wanted B. Simone to support her in more than she actually did. But Megan placed her expectations onto B. Simone, and B. Simone did not have the ability to rise up to those expectations. Neither were wrong, or neither were right. It was just that there was an expectation, and expectation could not be met. Let me show you what I mean. We're gonna go back on some previous conversation. We're gonna go back, and I'm gonna bring you back to an old video that they spoke about, and I think that you'll see what I'm gonna talk about here. Okay, so we're gonna bring it to around about here. And I just want you to pay attention. I'll probably speed up a little bit as well. So just that, just so that we can get through a little bit quicker. All right.
I get it. I'm sorry it spilled on you. It's been bleeding though. Do you know what I mean? That's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah.
And I try to avoid it not getting on anyone, and then it does.
Yeah.
And it's not my intention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing, like you said something the other day, and I'm like, and that's the whole thing I'm trying to avoid, is that the heaviness of who I am. I don't want anyone to feel that. And it makes me isolate myself. And then in isolating myself, it's inevitable that it's still heavy. If that makes sense.
I think.
All right, cool. I want you to pay attention to this next part, right? Because I'm going to play this clip, then I'm going to go back to Dear Future Wifey. I want you to pay attention to this part because this is where I think the relationship actually is actually where it's crashed down. I think this is literally where the relationship's crashed down. Coming from an avoidant perspective, I can see how it's gonna play out, right? I kind of mentioned this a couple of months ago when I did a video on this. I think it's now been made very, very clear. The heaviness that she's talking about, she speaks about in the Dear Future Wifey episode. But I want you to listen to what B. Simone actually ends up saying, because this is the problem between the anxious and avoidant person. The avoidant person, again, is avoiding the emotions. And the anxious person is expecting the other party, wanting the other party to behave as they would do, right? Thoughtful, considerate, thinking well ahead. But the reality is, what is your expectation of that person rooted in? And a lot of times the anxious person, just like the avoidant person, has selfish tendencies. It just comes out looking differently and smells differently because onto the outside world, it's like, oh, no, that's what's wrong with her wanting the expectation? It's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is, it's what it's rooted in. And it's rooted in the selfishness of you being validated, right? So I'm going to play a little, just listen very carefully.
The heaviness for me
like I said, I'm trying to say a lot without going in detail of our text messages and stuff, because I don't think that's necessary or relevant to the public right now. But you know, I'm solution based, and sometimes it's like, well, it's heavy, bitch. I could carry it. Let's carry it. Like, if it's heavy, let's carry it. Let's go. Come on, you put half on here. I'm gonna take this half. I'll take this half. But I think I'm right now in this season, like, the way we're carrying it isn't working for me. It's not working. So what is a different way to carry it? You might have to take it back for right now. I might have to go get my mind right and figure out a way to become stronger and come back and help you again. And if you're carrying it, we have to figure out a way to get it off of you, whether I'm helping you carry it or not. I think that was I'm not so much scared or upset about helping carry. Not saying that you need that or want that or ask for that.
Now that's I'm still off the camera. That's a really important place to be, right? Because she talks about that heaviness. What is that heaviness that we're talking about? Well, actually, we're gonna find out, because I didn't even realize it was there. We're gonna find out just like now. Just hold on a minute now.
I struggled really bad with depression and suicide. So at that time, both sets of my parents, so my mother and my stepfather, and my father and my stepmother were getting divorced at the same time. The same exact time, I think they were like a month or two apart from each other. So God. Life was just like, and I'm 16. And so I don't know if anybody knows, but like scientific facts show that girls at the age of 16 are like mentally, what was it, Jordan? Like they're mentally, clinically insane. They're clinically described as insane because of their hormones our hormones are so crazy and we're growing. So
well, that's what was wrong with my daughter around that age.
Imagine being 16 and going through both of your parents getting a divorce. You know, it was hard for me, and feeling like, you know, it was like, girl, stop. You have to live and do this work. So I love you. Get over it, you know? So yeah.
I love you.
But I mean, I struggled for a long time up until about 2022 is when, well, the end of 2021 was the last time that I was physically like harmful to myself. And I believe that the Lord has delivered me from suicide and depression. Like I don't have those thoughts and feelings. I don't even remember the last time I had like a thought like that. So.
Now, before you start talking, listen, let me just say this now, right? To anybody who has to deal with somebody who is dealing with mental health. Now, you guys, if you don't know my story already, I've told you about my mom's situation. That is one of the most difficult things, right? To deal with somebody knowing that at any moment, they could be triggered to a point where they could want to contemplate killing themselves, contemplate cutting themselves. If they get too overwhelmed, they may harm themselves in some shape or form. Right? That is a heavy burden for the person who's going through it, but it becomes even heavier for the person on the other side too. I believe this is what they were talking about when they said there were some things that they were going through. Because this up until 2022, right, it was the last time, but the thoughts are still going to be there. The heaviness, the depression, going through the divorce at the same time that she's going through, it's all going to be heavy. Then obviously, remember, divorce that she's gone through is now linked to the fact that she had a divorce at 16 with her parents, went for a divorce too. So that's going to be even more heavier, her dealing with a current divorce that she was going through at the time. There would have been a lot going on, right? And so when you are the other party trying to carry that load, hallelujah, by the glory, you need Jesus to carry, because at that point, I don't have the stamina or the strength. Now, as an avoidant person, it's even worse. Because again, what you heard B. Simone say was, well, we need to find another way of doing this. We need to find another way of carrying this burden and this cross that you're talking about. We need to find another way of doing it. Right? And so now you're in this place where, and I want to go to this clip because I want to talk about their situation, again, because there's a really important part I wanted to get to, right? But it's all about expectations, and the expectations are going to differ because of the way that they show up and the way they want to do things, right? So let me bring this point for you. Okay, cool. Let me bring this point here. I want to get to this point here. There we go.
That I feel maybe I'm not taking away your experience. That's your experience. I'm saying that's obviously, or not obviously, that's not my intent. I think that I struggle sometimes with feeling like I considered you in that way. Did you consider me in that way? I think that's my thing in my head. Like I consider, I'm just saying, did you consider it? Did you think about it?
And probably not.
And I'm saying for me, I think that's just my mind, but it's also not my expectation. But I'm thinking like, did you think about that? Because I know for you, like your love language is words of affirmation.
Okay, just to pause it real quick, just to kind of explain what's happening here. The avoidant and the anxious person, again, we're dealing with now. We've got more information about how, you know, there's things that are heavy. The anxious and the avoidant person, what's really happening in their situation is that both parties are trying to feel more secure, right? And through that, sometimes manipulation is used to be able to make themselves feel more secure, right? Because both parties tend to use what we call indirect language. And so they don't tend to be direct. They tend to say, I expect you to pick up on certain body language or my facial expression or read between the lines, right? The avoidant will use, well, I wasn't here, so what do you expect me to do? Like, you know what I mean? Like they're not gonna physically turn up, right? They're not gonna physically turn up then. And that should be an indication that they're not trying to turn up. And instead of just saying, hey, I'm not going to turn up. And the anxious person, what they tend to do is indirectly, by doing so many things for you, are trying to say, love me, love me, love me. I want your validation. You know what I'm saying to you? All right. And so both parties speak indirectly through their behaviors and their words and their actions and expressions, but none of them are direct. That's why the secure person is always that's why we look to improve ourselves to be the secure person, because that often comes with more direct language. And when I say direct, I'm not talking about go and do. We're not talking about commanding language. We're not talking about directives. We're talking about direct language where you state plainly what you want, and you're able to mix both indirect and direct, and know what time and season to say something, to read between the lines, because there are times for that as well, and when to say something more direct because it needs to be said without nobody missing or trying to interpret what you just said. Right? So direct and indirect language is very, very important for any of the parties involved in this insecure language. But insecure people oftentimes end up using indirect language until they get vexed. When they get vexed, everybody starts using indirect language. All of a sudden, everyone starts using direct language all of a sudden. And then people get offended because if we've previously been using indirect language and you suddenly switch to direct, people get offended because now are you trying to come at me? Are you trying to... And suddenly you feel that the tone has changed, the intonation has changed, and the words that they use are changed. And now it feels different because they're using direct language. They're no longer, trying to think about your emotions. Direct language oftentimes is not concerned about the other person's emotions. Not in a bad way, but just they're not thinking about it. They're like, let me get a message across so there's no mishap. But indirect language thinks, how do I make sure that people's feelings are not hurt? I don't want you to be hurt. I don't want you to be hurt. I've got to think about how I'm going to deliver it. And that's great too, but there's a time and a season for it. So I want you to pay attention to what's happening in this moment, because what's happening in between Megan and B. Simone is an explanation about expectations, but also how the indirectness ends up being manipulation. And we don't really talk about it oftentimes because it's like, no, that's just me. But the reality is, when you are trying to, and when I say manipulate can be used in both a good and a bad way. Manipulate can be to master a skill or an art. When we've mastered the ability to be able to indirectly communicate to get our needs, because we don't know how to communicate our actual needs and wants to somebody. Yeah, that's what I mean by manipulation in some sense, right? It's not always a negative.
Right. Or I also think acts of service can be part of your love language as well. Mm-hmm. So like when you're down, I'm like, okay, I know she likes this. I know she would want to do that. Mm-hmm, and da. Or it's like, you don't have to ask that of me. Mm-hmm. So then for me, I'm like, I wonder if I'm ever considered in the same way, and not out of fear, out of just, I love you. And just as much as you pay attention to me, I pay attention to you. Mm-hmm. It's almost like that. Like I don't want anyone, like I am regardless of all of my flaws and fuck ups, I'm a giving person.
Right.
Not just of things, but of my time and of myself. Mm-hmm. Right. I know that I do those things because I love people, but I also do it because it makes me feel good and because it's who I am, mm-hmm. right? I know that at my best, it's impactful. At my best. And I also know at my worst, it's impactful.
Right.
So what I'm going to explain here, it's going to sound a bit mad, but I have to explain it. Okay. So the anxious person isn't aware, for instance, okay, what she explained there, let's break down what she said. She said, hey, me personally, I do it out of my fiber and my being and the goodness of my heart, basically what she's saying. It's like, I just do it because it's me, right? But your me places an expectation on the other party, both through perception of the other party feeling like that, but also because you're putting some of that on them. So it's a bit of both. We're both wrong here, or we can say we both perceive something in a sense, or one projects and one perceives, right? And so you doing something out of the goodness of your heart is true, you do, right? But what the anxious person is unable to see is that part of your motivation isn't clean. So when you're motivated to do these things, you are expecting it back, and you're expecting it the same way that you did it, right? If I don't show up in the same way that you showed up, you do get frustrated. You do feel some type of way because you expect from how you do it, I got to do it the exact same way. And then that puts pressure on the other party. That's not loving. Like we said, we have love languages that are differently. So I'm going to communicate differently. Right? So there should be a better understanding. So both parties, unfortunately, through their perceptions and their expectations, miss each other. Right? And so I'm going to show you, because actually Beastman is going to actually talk about it in a second or two, about the way that expectation is, and I think let me see. All right, cool. Yeah, I got it. Here we go. I think it's
feel like just as much as you love me is as much as you're going to hate me. It's very hard to have this with me. I am working to find this.
Okay.
I don't know what this is because
Okay.
I've never experienced it within myself.
Mhm.
I'm here or I'm here. I don't know what
The
it's
in-between,
like
the
to
middle.
be. I mean, and then when people do for me, I don't want them to do for me out of what I did for them, but do for me because what I did is who I am. If that makes sense. So when you show up for me, when we were discussing this, when you show up for me, I love that you show up, but I also can feel that you did this not because you love me, because you're afraid that if you didn't do it, it's gonna make me upset.
Right.
And that doesn't
Out of
feel
fear.
good
Right.
for
right.
me either.
Right.
So then it almost becomes
Right.
counterproductive.
Right.
And I'm like, am I not just worthy enough to show up for?
Right.
And that's where you're going to have the problem. That's where the problem's going to start from, is that she already makes a conclusion that if I don't, I showed up for you, so why can't you show up for me? I can show up for you, but maybe my show up for you is different. And remember, because anxious and avoidant are speaking two different languages, I don't speak in an emotional language. I speak solutions. You're speaking emotions. Who's right and who's wrong? Well, neither party is. Right or wrong, right? But obviously, of course, once again, it's a communicational issue. Both parties need to come to a middle ground to understand where the other party is coming from. You're still projecting how you think the other person is going to think, that they should think like you. But this is what I'm trying to this is where you have to realize that the insecure attachment on both sides pushes this narrative that it has to be done my way. And so the anxious person will wrestle the avoidant person to get them to think like them. And the avoidant person will like, hey, I need you to think like me. Whereas secure person's like, this is me. And the other secure person goes, this is me too. I accept you for who you are. You accept me for who I am. Yeah, cool. Right? But the insecure attachments tend to try and fight for their way to do things. So Simone wants to have solutions. That's her selfish way of doing things. She's not willing to open herself up to the emotional plane. And it will come to also our good sis, Megan. She will not open herself up to the solutional place because she wants to be in the emotional plane, because that's what they know. Neither party is necessarily right or wrong, but they are wrong where they don't want to look at each other's perspective, right? So listen to this part here where she's going to explain, and it's the last part we've got to get off because the time is going.
I feel like, and maybe I'm talking this in real time, maybe it started off as showing up. And then I maybe didn't meet those expectations in that moment. So maybe I did show up and it wasn't the right way or the right timing or the right, well, you showed up, but you didn't do this. So then it's like, well, I'm not showing up the right way. So, okay. So then it turned into showing up out of fear.
I think too, for what I've experienced.
And see what happened here? Megan didn't slow it down. She should have paused and waited, because she's about to add another point, which is a good point, but it's another point. You wanted to explain about how she shows up with fear. She's answered it and said, the reason why I'm showing up that way is because previously maybe I've tried to show up for you and it wasn't to your liking and your expectation. So now I'm fearful about how I do show up. Right? Now, instead of Megan actually hearing that, she doesn't hear that. She goes on to make another point, which is a fair point. The point was actually a fair point. She goes on to say that, well, sometimes you overpromise. And that's a classic avoidant tactic. I can't lie to you. They will, because they're afraid to say no. So this is why they become avoidant, because the no comes with emotions, right? me saying no to you comes with emotions. If I'm an avoidant person and you tell me, can you show up for me? And I'm like, I can't. I don't have the energy for it. Instead of me being direct, because remember, I'm insecure, like you're insecure as an anxious person, I'm going to be like, So what I'll do is I'll drag my feet, or I might not turn up the way you want me to turn up, or I might overpromise and say, yeah, I'm going to turn up, but then I get into my emotions later on. I'm like, I don't really want to. And avoidance, funnily enough, are emotional beings. The issue is they don't want to deal with other people's emotions because they haven't even dealt with their own properly. So, they'll end up overpromising, which is actually you being, I call it a passive-aggressive war tactic. It's, I don't know what the tactic is called. It's Sun Tzu's 33 Tactics of War, or Robert Greene's Tactics of War. I can't remember what it's called, but where you passive aggressively, like, you do things to sabotage the situation, and that's essentially what Simone will end up doing, because it's too heavy to carry. And so these people are both in a place of manipulation, unfortunately. And look, it's a part and parcel of friendships. There is a place of healing this can actually happen, but that's what the therapy was there for. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that. But hopefully later on the line, they actually will. So listen, like, share, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down below. We appreciate you guys. Stay loaded. Let's get deep in our topic.